investigation and scrutiny of this licensing application? All you have to ask is yes or no.
No, Congressman.
All you have to ask
the
is yes or
OCC
no.
is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman,
I take that as a no.
You traveled to Venezuela
I
to lobby
take that as a no.
Chavez.
Work for the American people.
maybe
Don't be a cover-up for a mob.
Maybe you're going to
As
see your
long as
friend
he talks,
Nicholas
you talk.
Maduro
I will.
in Brooklyn
is not
prison.
recognized, Mr. Besson.
It's the same old story with this guy. He's essentially a loudmouth in an empty vessel. When you don't have a solid argument, you just crank up the volume and hope nobody notices the lack of substance. Meeks loves to play the role of the moral authority, but as we're going to see in this full exchange with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, his righteous indignation is really just a cover for a lack of real solutions. He's up there shouting about mobs and flunkies because he can't actually debate the economic policy on the table. It's embarrassing for New York, and it's embarrassing for Congress. If you're tired of these theatrical meltdowns and want to see some actual leadership for a change, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We need to keep holding these career politicians accountable. Stick around, because we're going to dive into the full mess right now.
Secretary Bessent, if I'm not mistaken, you were working in the financial service industry during the late 1980s, correct?
I was.
Thank you. And well, I'm wondering, do you recall or you're knowledgeable of the Keating 5 scandal back then?
Yes, sir. And I will point out that I was.
I don't want to.
No. I will point out that
limited time. I have limited time.
I identified.
The gentleman is from the Secretary. Is the gentleman from New York Times?
So I just want to make sure that everyone knows, who doesn't know, that the Keating 5 scandal involved 5 U.S. senators accused of pressuring the Federal Home Loan Bank Board to expedite and give more consideration to the case of Charles Keating, Jr., who ran the California-based Lincoln Savings and Loans. It led to a 14-month investigation unveiling how 5 U.S. senators and staff ended up with more than $1 million in contributions, 4 trips to the Bahamas, and all expenses paid stays at resort hotels. Following the scandal, the industry saw sweeping regulatory changes that was launched by then-President George H.W. Bush. Now, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you can agree conflicts of interest and improper influence by U.S. elected officials over bank regulators weaken supervisory independence and ultimately impose massive losses on consumers and taxpayers. I think that we can all agree upon that. And as we know, the basic lessons from the post-Keating reforms still applies today when the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the OCC, is deciding to get a bank charter. I think we can stimulate that. Now, Mr. Bessent, as our nation's treasurer, I'm sure you also know that a foreign-linked investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates government quietly bought about half of the Trump family's crypto company, World Liberty Financial. And at the very same time, the President of the United States was dealing with that country on foreign policy. Now, Eric Trump, the president's son and co-founder of World Liberty Financial, said, and I quote, "I'm not going to get into who the investors are, but I've got some pretty meaningful investors," end of quote. Lack of transparency. And it didn't end there. When Trump fans brought the tokens, they thought they were getting the deal of a century. But what they didn't know was that only Trump and his sons had the sole power to decide who can sell the token and when. Today, the price of the token has fallen over 50%, and the Trump fans who bought the token are now begging to get out. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. You can see it for yourself on the World Liberty Financial Discussion Forum, yourself, Mr. Secretary. So this is no longer just about a shady crypto deal or a possible gift. When a foreign-linked investor is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a company controlled by the president's family, and at the same time, this president is conducting foreign policy with that country. You know what that creates? It creates a national security concern. So, I'm not going to ask much of you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to know whether you will commit today to pause and heighten the scrutiny of any bank charter or licensing application at the OCC connected to the World Liberty Financial until all of these conflicts of interest and foreign influence reviews are completed and shared with the United States Congress. All I need to know is, will you halt it and do a complete investigation and scrutiny of this licensing application? All you have to ask is yes or no.
No, Congressman.
All you have to ask
the
is yes or
OCC
no.
is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman.
so I take that as a no.
You traveled to Venezuela to lobby
I take that as a no.
Chavez on behalf of
I
your
take that
donors,
as a
on
no.
behalf of your
You
donors.
do not want to answer that
I was
question.
sentenced to 110
I take
years
that
in
as a
jail
no.
For a $7 billion
Gentleman's
contract.
I'm asking you to do your responsibility as Secretary of the Treasury.
Into a Venezuelan.
You do not.
Mr. Meeks,
Will you?
time has expired.
You cannot erase what you did in 2006.
He's the one that went past your time, Mr. Chairman.
No, and
he did not answer my question, and he wouldn't pass the
Mr.
time.
Meeks. He had 6 seconds left to try to answer your question, and the
It was a yes or no. It was a yes or no answer. I asked him, will he? No, was that yes or no?
The
recognizes
OCC
the
is an
gentleman.
independent
Stop
agency.
covering for the president.
Yeah, well,
Stop being his flunky.
yeah, and
Gentlemen.
He's talking to me. I'm responding
your
back to him.
2006 trip to Venezuela.
Stop covering for the president. Don't be a flunky. Work for the American people.
Secretary, Mr. Meeks,
Trip to
Mr.
Venezuela.
Meeks.
Work for the American people.
maybe
Don't
you're
be
going-
a
maybe you're
cover-up
going to-
for a mob.
Maybe you're going to
As
see your
long as
friend
he talks,
Nicholas
you talk.
I
Maduro
will.
in
Gentleman is
Brooklyn
not
prison.
recognized.
What this congressional exchange revealed was not just a policy disagreement, but a deeper problem with how political theater often replaces serious oversight in Washington. During the hearing, Congressman Gregory Meeks attempted to pressure Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent into committing to halt regulatory processes related to a crypto firm allegedly linked to the Trump family. The tactic was straightforward: reduce a complex regulatory and national security issue to a single, forced, yes or no soundbite. But government does not function on soundbites. Agencies like the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency are designed to operate independently from political pressure, precisely to avoid the kind of interference that Meeks claims to be worried about. Ironically, by demanding that the Treasury Secretary directly intervene in an ongoing regulatory process, Meeks was asking for the very politicization of financial oversight that past scandals were supposed to prevent. To make his point, Meeks invoked the Keating 5 scandal, a case where senators were accused of improperly influencing banking regulators. The comparison was meant to paint the Trump family's crypto dealings as a potential repeat of that corruption. But the argument collapsed under its own logic. If political pressure on regulators was wrong then, why would it be acceptable now, simply because the target is a political opponent? Secretary Bessent's refusal to provide the simple yes or no answer that Meeks demanded was not evasiveness. It was an acknowledgement of institutional boundaries. A Treasury Secretary does not have the legal authority to unilaterally halt independent regulatory reviews without due process. Suggesting otherwise undermines the very safeguards meant to protect financial markets from partisan interference. What followed was a predictable escalation. Instead of engaging with the substance of the response, Meeks shifted to personal accusations, suggesting the secretary was acting as a flunky or covering for the president. This rhetorical shift is telling. When political arguments fail on procedural or legal grounds, they often devolve into attacks on motive and character, because those are easier to communicate than regulatory nuance. the broader implication is troubling. Congressional hearings are supposed to provide clarity, accountability, and rigorous questioning. But moments like this reinforce public cynicism that these proceedings are more about viral clips and partisan point scoring than actual governance. And that is the real cost of this kind of performance. When oversight becomes spectacle, serious discussions about financial regulation, foreign investment, and national security are drowned out by shouting matches and forced soundbites. In the end, the American public is left not with answers, but with another reminder of how broken the tone of political discourse has become.